The staff of the Tuscaloosa News and TideSports.com join WVUA 23's Jen Chapman at Will Hagen's Grill and Tap Room for an in-depth analysis of the Crimson Tide and SEC football. This is Tide Sports TV.
Welcome into Tide Sports TV. We are live from Will Hagen's here Monday night. We just want to remind you that it is Monday night, so some of these questions later on in the week, the answers could change a little bit. Joining me for the big picture from the Tuscaloosa News and TideSports.com, Tommy Dees. And Tommy Dees will be on the show with me the whole entire show. So we got Tommy Dees and me. I like it.
Okay.
It goes well together.
Let's do it.
Let's start things off, since we are in the big picture, about the college football playoffs and what the whole picture is looking like. I know we've got the 4 right now, but we've got championship games this weekend. How do you see it kind of shaking up? Will it shake up at all?
Well, that's the big question. I think it's pretty obvious if everybody does what they're supposed to do. If Clemson wins, then Clemson will be there as the ACC champion. If Alabama wins, Alabama will be there as the SEC champion. The Big Ten champion will certainly be in, whether that's Michigan State or Iowa. And then we have Oklahoma, which has already clinched the Big 12, so they're in. Now, if Alabama were to lose or Clemson were to lose, that could open it up for somebody else, and then you're talking Ohio State, maybe you're talking Stanford. If Stanford wins the Pac-12, you could see maybe possibly some chaos there, but not the kind of chaos that you might have seen otherwise. If both lose, you could see 2 Big 12 teams, but if Alabama does what it's supposed to, I think it's like this. If Clemson wins, I suspect that Clemson will play somebody in the Orange Bowl in the playoffs. And if Alabama wins, I think Alabama will play somebody in Dallas in the playoffs. But that's not set in stone until all the games are played.
So basically, regardless of how Clemson wins and how someone else loses, if Clemson wins, they are getting that number 1 seed. Is that kind of the consensus amongst everyone? They won't move from number 1? They'll stay there?
That's kind of what I think. Although there are some people who think Oklahoma could move up. They're sitting in the clubhouse right now, so their resume is done, and they finished very strong and beat good teams at the end. They've got that one bad glaring loss, and it would be hard for me to believe that if Clemson were to win, that they're going to get supplanted as number 1, just because maybe they didn't look good. Because last time I looked, Oklahoma didn't look good when they lost to Texas, and they lost. And if you have an undefeated team that's a conference champion, that's had some challenges, as well. North Carolina's a good win if they win. Notre Dame is a good win for sure. Florida State's a good win. I don't see how you could take Clemson out from my point of view. And I think if Clemson's the number 1 seed, Clemson should be in the Orange Bowl against the number 4, whoever that is. And then Alabama, if Alabama is the 2 or the 3, I think it's looking more and more to me like Alabama or Oklahoma if Alabama beats Florida.
I like how you brought up the Texas loss to Oklahoma, because there's been some commentary now that Alabama's loss to Ole Miss is not impressive. And again, there's some commentary out there just trying to stir up things that potentially, even if Alabama wins the SEC West, they could still get left out of the playoffs. Is that just commentary to stir up controversy, or is there some validity that if Alabama still wins the SEC championship, that they might not get in?
I can't see how that happening. I mean, is it possible? Yeah, it's a committee. But I think it's just people looking for things to talk about. And, I don't know how Alabama's loss to Ole Miss got worse since 3 weeks ago, because Ole Miss has been winning games lately. Ole Miss just won the Egg Bowl. Ole Miss is a 9-3 team. I think Ole Miss had a decent season and not a great season. It's a lot better loss than Texas.
Well, let's talk about Alabama's next opponent, Florida. They didn't look great this weekend. They really haven't looked like themselves in the last couple of weeks. What would it take for the Gators to upset the Tide?
Well, Florida scored 2 points against Florida State on a safety, so I'd say about 14 safeties and a real good defensive game, and maybe they can beat Alabama. Florida's got a good defense. I think they get worn out a little bit in games, and I think Alabama's the type team that can wear them out. Mm-hmm. They would need some help from Alabama. They would need some turnovers, and they would need to be able to produce some offense, which they've had struggled to do lately. I think they had 14 points in regulation or 13 or something like that against Florida Atlantic 2 weeks ago, and then basically shut out offensively against Florida State. Can they beat Alabama? Yeah, they've got a good defense, and they beat Ole Miss like a drum, as Nick Saban pointed out in his press conference to open the week. So they've got some capability, but they don't have the kind of quarterback play, I think, having lost their guy to basically a steroid suspension or a PED suspension. They have not really put it together offensively. They can run the ball a little bit, but can't run it against Alabama very easily. So I struggle to find a way they could win without Alabama turning it over and handing them something.
I really liked Saban's comments today.
They don't have a kicker. I mean, they literally don't have a kicker.
Oh, because they had tryouts earlier this year, didn't they?
Yeah, student body.
They let anyone come.
Right.
That is correct. They have no Adam
They
Griffith
may just
on that
do
team.
the Dr. Pepper halftime challenge or something.
Oh, that would be terrible. But I did really like Nick Saban's quotes today at the press conference, talking about not taking this game lightly, that he doesn't want in the media, us, setting him up should they lose to Florida. And you know what was more interesting was the players already understood that message. They were very serious today when we got to speak with them, that they're not looking past Florida and they're not looking to the playoffs because they know they have to beat Florida, and they know that Florida only put up 2 points this weekend. They're aware of that. But they also know what Florida is capable of under Jim McElwain. So let's get to that, Coach. What does he present?
Well, first of all, to Nick Saban's point, I mean, this setting up somebody up by saying one team's better than another.
Not.
I don't think you're setting them up. I mean, when I watch the New England Patriots and I see that they win Super Bowls and they win AFC championships, and I say that, boy, they're playing the Chicago Bears and they're not very good. I think New England's going to win. I'm not setting New England up. New England should win that game. Alabama should win this game. Alabama's got a better resume.
On the flip side, Coach Saban is setting his team up.
Oh, absolutely. I understand why he's saying what he's saying, but the media is not setting him up. If there were no media, the fans would still say Alabama is better than Florida and would expect Alabama to win. I truly believe that. Anyway, Jim McElwain is, in my opinion, the coach of the year in the SEC, and that's with all due respect to Nick Saban, because Florida did not have the material to be where they're at right now by most reckoning. And Florida wasn't supposed to be where they're at right now by most reckoning. So maybe the media set Jim McElwain up to be coach of the year by saying Florida wasn't good enough.
Hey, give us some credit for something, right? All right, let's talk about Nick Saban's accomplishments. Alabama has won 11 games or more now in 5 straight seasons. How remarkable of an accomplishment is that, and how high of a standard is he setting?
Impossibly high. I mean, nobody else is doing it anywhere. If Alabama beats Florida, Alabama will be the only one of the 4 teams that were in the playoff to repeat the second year. Alabama's in the picture every year. There was a stat that Alabama has won 10 or more for 8 straight seasons. That's a little easier to do these days because you got more games. Back when you were playing an 11-game season with no championship game, you did not have that. And earlier on, they were playing 10-game seasons. So it's harder to win 10 games every year. Easier to win 10 games every year than it used to be. It's not easy, but it's more, you can still drop a couple. You can't do that and win 11 every year. And that's what Alabama's doing. And it's absolutely remarkable. It's the highest standard there is, and it's the gold standard in college football.
And it's making some things very difficult at other programs in the SEC who are also very successful both on and off the field, and those coaches are feeling the heat and the pressure from the Saban effect. Well, that's all the time we have right now, but when we come back, we're going to go in depth with the Tide. We're going to go inside the Tide and really break down the Tide's offense, defense, and maybe we'll get to talk about Adam Griffith, one of my favorites. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Tide Sports TV, live at Will Higgins. We are now going inside the Tide, brought to you by Ziegler Meats. It's now Tommy D's and me. It's our show tonight. So, Tommy, let's talk about the Iron Bowl. What were the high points and what were the low points? Let's always start with the high.
Well, the first high point is Alabama won it, and it's a rivalry game, and you can never take those light. You're always going to get the opponent's best shot, and that's the main thing is Alabama couldn't mess it up. 2013, Alabama, I think, most people thought going into the game had the better team and let that game get away. So it was important for dominance in the rivalry and to have the upper hand for bragging rights. For all those fans out there that wouldn't be happy today, Alabama won the game. So they did do some good things. They made some adjustments. I think Auburn was able to run the ball in the first half, a little surprisingly so.
Wow. Robinson did a great job.
Yeah, and I think early in the game, that's a little bit of formation. You throw something at somebody they hadn't seen, maybe a different blocking scheme than they're prepared for. They adjust to it. But then there's a period in the second quarter where Auburn's just running dive plays straight up the middle that are moving the chains and getting yards. And Alabama hasn't been a team that has allowed. Leonard Fournette couldn't do that. So that was a little surprising and maybe a low point. But the high point would be that Alabama turned around and was able to adjust. In the second half, Auburn ends up with 1 rushing yard, and they put the onus on Auburn to complete passes, and that's not something Auburn can consistently do. They got one kind of funny little double tip play, and that's about it that mattered. So I think Alabama special teams across the board have really, really, really improved over the course of the season, including one guy that we're going to talk about right now.
Yeah, we'll go right to Adam Griffith. How surprising has his turnaround been? And I'll have to say, not surprising for me because I believed that he could turn it around. So what do you think, though?
Oh, I think it's surprising. I don't know, he can say he had confidence and he never lost confidence. He was not kicking the ball with confidence early this year. Talking to him after the game, he talked about technical improvements, working on his steps and his approach, and I'm sure those are important too. But you got to believe you're going to make the kick. And when you're a quarterback, you got to believe you're going to throw the pass well. And when you're a receiver, you got to believe you can catch it. I think he got to a point where he didn't believe, where he was hesitant, where he did not have confidence. And all of a sudden, it started working for him. And it slowly, nobody noticed it when it was just a couple of 23-yarders, because that's all they were letting him attempt. They were going when it was longer. And then you fast forward to the Auburn game where he kicks a 40-something yarder under pressure. Well, that game's very much in doubt in the first half in the second quarter. Then he kicks a 50-yarder and another 40-something, ends up with 5 field goals, 2 extra points, and his kickoffs were fantastic.
How sweet would it have been if he had got to kick 6 field goals?
Well, that would have been cute, and it would have been fun to write, but I tried to avoid that. But he did talk about that. He thought, of course, he's from Poland, so he has a different perspective on this thing. His introduction to the Iron Bowl and the rivalry is not that he did anything wrong. All he did was miss a kick. But somehow a lot of people figured he was the GOAT. Like it was him that was supposed to go tackle the guy. Wrong. But, they were able to return a kick that came off his foot. So I think it did mean something to him. He kind of said that at first, and then he kind of alluded to, that it did mean something against Auburn. It meant more, I think, for him personally, and I think for his teammates.
And I think his teammates were excited when he got that first one out. Just all of them rushed over to him that he got the first one. But the other thing that's interesting, you brought up him from Poland, and one of the reasons why I really do enjoy watching him play and talking to him after games is that he has such a great perspective about life. If you haven't seen his story, it is an incredible story. Growing up in an orphanage, was adopted by a family in Georgia, and he did say that he has kind of put that in perspective when it comes to football, and it's helped him relax. He's gone through much bigger things outside of football, and that's what's led him to kind of be like, he can get over this slump and move forward just like he's gone forward in life. Yeah,
and D.C. Reeves, who was on our staff last year and now works in Pensacola, Florida, was the one who wrote that story first. There had been some allusion to him being from Poland, but he went out and found the whole story and went and spent some time with the family. And there was one part of that story that was related when the Griffith family went over before adopting him and meeting him. And he's like the only person as old as him who got adopted out of that country the whole year. Because people they go adopt babies. Yeah. So the kid's kicking around a ball at the orphanage, and a dog comes up and just grabs the ball and runs off. That's like the only toy or whatever. The only thing that you can do is kick a ball, and now the dog came up and ran and took it. But, you probably can't appreciate where he came from and the desolation of that situation without reading a little more and looking into it, because it's a happy story, but it's not a happy beginning.
Correct. And appreciate your kicker, and hopefully everybody out there is now rooting for Adam Griffith. Let's move on to Derrick Henry. When Adam Griffith is stealing the show in the first half, then Derrick Henry has to take it back in the second half. He's got a Heisman campaign he's on right now. 271 yards. I don't even know if people are aware. He broke 5 different Alabama records in that game, one of them being the most carries, 46 carries. That's just an unbelievable load. What can you say about this guy?
He's not getting the ball enough. That's what I say. There's plenty of plays out there where they don't give it to him, and those are plays that they need to eliminate from the playbook. It's amazing that he can carry this workload, but this is what he did all through high school. This is how he became high school football's all-time leading rusher with 400,000 yards or whatever it was, 14,000, something like that. I can't remember, but an incredible amount of yards. And he was carrying it 40 and 50 times a game sometimes, and that's against high school kids. But you know what? Compared to him, those aren't men out there. He's the man out there, and they're the boys, and he is stomping through them. It's like that Led Zeppelin song, Trampled Underfoot. They need to play that when he's running.
Well, he really put himself on the map. I like that. After the LSU game, do you think his case for Heisman is strong enough now to win it?
Oh, absolutely. I certainly would. You want to finish strong in the SEC championship game, but I don't think he needs 300 yards. I think against, that defense, a few people have gotten in the 100 and something, including last week, Cook for Florida State did. So, yeah, it would be nice for him to get 100, 150 or whatever, but I think if he doesn't do anything to screw it up, there are still other players that may have a chance. I would be surprised at this point if he does not win the Heisman Trophy.
All right.
And I vote for the Heisman Trophy, and I will not cast my vote until the last game is played, because you go through this coming weekend, and I never make up my mind for sure until it's over. But I would say right now he's the guy that I would look at most. I tend to vote for the best player I have personally seen in person.
Okay.
But playing, covering the SEC, you're going to see good
see a
players.
lot, yeah.
So he's the best player I've seen in person this year.
And one more question right now. The best speech I saw last year, one of the best speeches, was Lane Kiffin's when he was at the Broyles Award, and he talked about Nick Saban following him up and down the sideline. I saw a lot of that this weekend. What can you say about Lane Kiffin, and is he underrated a little bit as the OC here?
I think he is to a lot of people. I think what he's shown is he can adapt. If you leave it to Lane and just say run whatever you want, and doesn't matter what the results are. I think Lane wants to run a West Coast short passing game. But I think the two things he does is get the ball in the hands of the playmaker. Amari Cooper last year, Derrick Henry this year, and he improves quarterbacks. And what he has done with Jake Coker, I think, over the second half of the season is coached a lot of bad throws out of him, a lot of forced throws. He still occasionally does it, but the turnovers are down. And they're not asking, they're telling Jake, your job isn't to have to carry this football team. The guy behind you is carrying this football team. You take care of the football and make smart decisions and manage the game. And then Jake provides some fire and everything, which is leadership. But I think Lane really works well with quarterbacks, given time. And he hadn't had a guy at Alabama that he's worked with year after year. So I do think he's a little underrated.
Nice. And I have to say that Jake scrambling and getting that touchdown to Ardarius Stewart was probably my favorite play of the game.
It's a
that
very
was
nice
awesome.
play. It was a mature play.
Very good. He's grown a lot.
Yes.
I would say the process has worked very well for him this year.
Yeah.
All right, well, that's all the time we have in this segment, but when we come back, it's time to answer your questions that you posted on the TideSports.com message board or that you tweeted at us at TideSportsTV. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Tide Sports TV. It's now time to answer your questions that you posted on the TideSports.com message board or that you tweeted us at TideSportsTV. The first question, is Nick Saban the best college football hire ever?
That's a hard one to answer. I mean, my inclination is to say no, but it's a different world than it was. Financially, I think Bear Bryant was, because Alabama got him for, I think, $25,000 a year, and what he has brought in, while Nick Saban has brought in millions and millions, Bear Bryant over the years has been responsible for more growth of the city of Tuscaloosa, the University of Alabama, and the state probably.
The lore, everything that's behind him.
So I find it hard to believe that you can say, in this modern era, Saban is the best hire out there that has been made. And it was an investment. And I think Robert Witt, the chancellor and previously the president of the university, looked at it as an investment. That Alabama being good in football was good for the University of Alabama. Now, I think that blew up bigger than they could have ever expected. But, yeah, he's a great hire, but $4 million in today's dollars and $25,000 in those dollars, I don't know how that balances out, but I think they're both really wise investments. But if I had to just say return on investment was a little higher with Bear Bryant so far, but we're not through the Saban era.
So you're looking at it more from a quantitative perspective. From a qualitative perspective, it's only compared to what you have right now. And obviously the success that Nick Saban has had has been pretty unmatched, and we're seeing that in the pressure the other SEC coaches are facing right now. You got something on that?
Sort of, but I was going to take it different. Another great hire in our lifetime is Mike Slive as the commissioner of the SEC. He took this league from being a college sports conference to being a brand, and really took it to where all that money's available to hire people like Nick Saban. So I would throw that in there as I wasn't a bad hire either.
So great is probably a better word to use than best or worst, because
Right.
it all depends on the situation and what they're
Yeah.
doing. I will also say, just from a reporter side, the way Coach Saban runs his team is very obvious that the players respect him, and that's in the way that they handle the media. I've been so impressed the last 2 seasons covering this group of guys and the way they respect Coach Saban. They don't look at him as a friend. And having been a college athlete and covering sports for a while, I do think that's kind of important because it demands a high level of respect, and that's what he gets. And I think that's a big reason why he gets the success both on and off the field. And this year's team has really had no issues off the field.
Not that we're aware of, for sure.
Yeah.
And then that's not always the case here or anywhere else. I mean, you get 85 people on scholarship and another, 40 or more that aren't on scholarship that are part of the organization. It's college. Bad things are going to happen. People are going to make knuckleheaded decisions, and there seems to have been less of those with this Alabama team.
It's true, and it's always great to see the coach involved in the community, which both him and Miss Terry are very involved here. Second question, is the SEC down this year? And if so, what does that tell us about Alabama?
I think it is down a little. There have been years where it's top heavy with 1 or 2 real contenders, and then kind of a solid middle, and then your Vandy's and Kentucky's at the bottom aren't very good. Well, the Vandy's and Kentucky's at the bottom, and Missouri aren't very good. The middle may not be quite as strong. I think there's not that second tier. I guess you could argue Ole Miss is kind of that, but LSU wasn't as strong as I thought. A&M wasn't as strong. I don't think the West is as strong as it was. I think it was stronger last year because you had both Ole Miss and Mississippi State, which are traditionally the cellar dwellers, doing really, really well and being number 1 or in the mix for part of the season. So I don't think it's as good, and I think the East is just almost abysmal across the board. Tennessee will end up with a good record, and you'll look at it and dissect it and say, who did they beat? And Georgia and a few others, but South Carolina is absolutely terrible, which they have been in the past, but seem to be there again with the old ball coach bailing early.
And who knows what will happen with all the different coaching shakeups as well. Third question, with 3 new coaches being hired in the SEC East, how long will the West be the dominant division in the league?
Forever. I'm convinced of that. It's funny that for a period of time in the past, the East was considered the strong side. You had Florida, which won a lot of championships. You had Tennessee, and Georgia was kind of in there sometimes, but that was considered the stronger side of the league because, you kind of had Alabama going through a down period. Nobody else really stood up and took over the West in a big way. So I think that was true, but now that the West is what it is, the competitive nature on this side and throughout this league is getting coaches fired, as we've seen, or making them decide they don't want to coach anymore. But I think the West is stronger and is going to stay stronger. I think you've got more stability, and with the kind of young coaching staffs that you have with recent hires and not longevity in the league on the East side, it's going to take time for them to establish themselves and step up. This Florida team that Alabama's playing is not as good as some of Steve Spurrier's Florida teams and some of Urban Meyer's Florida teams, although it's better than their worst teams maybe.
Perhaps sometimes the SEC standard is almost creating a problem for the SEC, though, when the standard is so high and you get 10 wins and that's not good enough. I think that almost puts a lot of pressure on the players as well, because then when it comes time for the bowls, it's not as big a deal to them because to them they didn't succeed in their season. And I don't love that message, because not every team is going to be the best, and not every team is going to have a Nick Saban, and so it is difficult to have that mindset around everybody. And
Yeah,
I think that's really messing with some of it, but we'll see how it all shakes out.
Play to win the game.
It's true. So
Ole Miss got curb stomped by TCU in a bowl last year. That doesn't make the SEC look good when Ole Miss was competitive and
earlier, yeah. I do think some of them may check out a little bit once the season if they didn't get to where the standard was. Let's get to the last question. Which playoff contender has the toughest game this weekend and the biggest chance for an upset?
I would have to go with Clemson there, playing North Carolina, which lost to South Carolina early, but that's a better football team than you think, and they've done a really, really good job. And I'm surprised Larry Fedora, their coach, is not on a lot of these lists we're hearing being thrown around right now, because North Carolina's playing good football.
And should Alabama win this weekend and do it well, we know this guy is going to be voting for Derrick Henry for Heisman.
We'll see.
That's all the time we have for Tide Sports TV. Thanks for joining us, and have a great week.